The Proto-Indo-Europeans, often abbreviated as PIE, represent an ancient group of people who held a pivotal role in shaping the development of Indo-European languages and the cultures associated with them. Their existence is, according to scholars, believed to have spanned the Late Neolithic period, with some scholars extending their presence to the Middle Neolithic period, 5500 to 4500 BC, or even the Early Neolithic period, 7500 to 5500 BC. And exploring their origins and beliefs offers a captivating glimpse into a significant chapter of human history. With it, this can give us a deeper understanding of the foundations of our culture, which is much more ancient for the Indo-European people than the Judeo-Christian values that were imported relatively late within the development of Western civilization. So whilst the Judeo-Christian values might be of importance for Western civilization itself in its current form, the Neolithic Proto-Indo-European base itself forms an important archetypal foundation for us. Especially Trito and the Koryos warrior tradition that we will go into later, which will be focused on the most, as these apply to the Wotan pattern we want to go deeper into. A main reason for our exploration of this culture is that it indeed lies at the foundation of Western civilization and with it archetypally as well. Thus the archetypes, such as Wotan for instance, find their earliest expressions within this most ancient cultural context. Also going deeper back, like I had explained in the earlier section about animistic hunting rituals, to the hunter archetype and with it to the primal instinctual side of human nature. This earlier hunter-gatherer side of our human nature often being shunned, seen as primitive, barbaric and generally bad. And whilst there is a shadow side to everything, there is however also a real value in integrating these primal energies in a constructive manner, where these archetypes and ancient ancestral patterns that still hold sway within the collective unconscious can be reintegrated. As like I had written earlier at the start of this chapter, this prevents these forces from influencing us in an unconscious manner, and this also prevents the potential dangerous manifestation of said archetypes. Yet before we can go into these traditions themselves and the descendant forms of this, it becomes important to give you, the reader and viewer, a backdrop for these traditions and with it also the Proto-Indo-European people themselves. Like I had written earlier, these people emerged within the Stone Age, the Neolithic age often referred to as the Stone Age, being a pivotal chapter in human history where profound shifts in lifestyle and societal organization took place. In this era ushered in the transition from a nomadic existence centered on hunting and gathering to settled farming communities that cultivated crops and domesticated animals. So to better grasp the dynamic evolution of this period, it is also essential to consider the three significant divisions within the Neolithic age: the Early Neolithic, Middle Neolithic and Late Neolithic periods, before we dive deeper into the Proto-Indo-Europeans. The Early Neolithic period marked the initial phase of the Neolithic age, characterized by the gradual shift from hunter-gatherer practices to agrarian lifestyles. During this time, communities began experimenting with agriculture, cultivating crops like wheat, barley, and legumes. The process of animal domestication commenced at this time as well, focusing on creatures like goats and sheep. Next, settlements gained permanence and simple dwellings were constructed as people started to establish more settled ways of living. Where next the Middle Neolithic period witnessed a continued refinement of agricultural techniques and animal domestication, leading to more diversified diets. Innovations such as pottery and more advanced tools for food processing and storage became also integral to daily life. Societies of this era displayed greater organization with the capacity to sustain larger populations within these established communities, where finally the Late Neolithic period represented the zenith of Neolithic achievements, featuring further enhancements in agriculture as well as technological advancements, including the introduction of metal tools and the wheel. Communities of this time began to exhibit greater complexity and the emergence of rudimentary forms of social hierarchy, and this period often serves as a transitional phase leading into the subsequent Bronze Age, which would bring about even more significant transformations in human society. And the Proto-Indo-Europeans are thought to have emerged in the vast Pontic-Caspian steppe, an expansive region extending from Eastern Europe to Central Asia during the Late Neolithic period for most scholars. This homeland served as the cradle of their culture and language, and the significance of this region lies in its role as the birthplace of the Indo-European language family, one of the most widespread language groups in the world. The Proto-Indo-European culture was marked by pastoralism and the domestication of cattle, horses, and dogs, and they introduced groundbreaking innovations such as the chariot, wagon, cavalry, and horse archery, enhancing their economic and cultural influence. The chariot they used were ancient vehicles used in warfare, typically drawn by horses, and these chariots played a crucial role in early military tactics and battles. They were like the tanks of their era, changing, the ways battles were fought. The domestication of the horse was particularly significant within this context, potentially being the reason leading to their expansion. And these innovations not only impacted their way of life, but also had far-reaching consequences in the lands they migrated to, leading to new forms of transport, trade, and communication. The Proto-Indo-European language forms the basis for a wide array of languages spoken today, including English, Spanish, Hindi, and Russian. The theory of linguistic evolution, as proposed by the Kurgan hypothesis, sheds light on the early migration patterns and language development of these people. The Kurgan hypothesis is a theory that suggests migration patterns of the Proto-Indo-Europeans and the spread of their language and culture. It is also referred to as the steppe theory, which is the widest accepted in the field. According to the Kurgan hypothesis, the earliest migration branch of the Proto-Indo-Europeans gave rise to the Anatolian languages, such as Hittite, which split from the archaic Proto-Indo-European community dwelling in the Volga basin. Subsequently, the second oldest branch produced Tocharian languages spoken in the Tarim basin, whilst the bulk of Indo-European languages developed from late PIE in the Yamnaya period around 3000 BC. Over time, descendants of the Proto-Indo-Europeans migrated far and wide, reaching Anatolia, the Aegean, Northern Europe, and even southern Siberia. And these migrations played a pivotal role in the spread of their cultural traits and language. And in the early 2nd millennium BC, the legacy of the Proto-Indo-Europeans had spread extensively across Eurasia. Their descendants had established themselves in various regions, including Anatolia, where the Hittites thrived. And they had a linguistic influence in the Aegean, laying the foundations for the Mycenaean Greek culture, where in the northern reaches of Europe, the corded ware culture emerged, where towards the edges of Central Asia, the Yamnaya culture showcased their influence. And around 4700 BC, a significant development took place as domesticated cattle was introduced from the Danube Valley to the Volga-Ural steppes. Cattle and sheep started to play a central role in the ritual sacrifices during this period, surpassing their importance as dietary staples. This shift suggests the emergence of new cults and rituals that spread eastward across the Pontic-Caspian steppes, with domesticated animals at the core of the Proto-Indo-European worldview. The period between 4200 and 3300 BC also witnessed a revolutionary transformation in steppe economies. Initially, there was a partial reliance on herding, with domesticated animals primarily serving as ritual currency for public sacrifices. However, this gradually evolved into a greater dietary dependence on cattle, as well as sheep or goat meat and dairy products. During this time, the first traces of cereal cultivation appeared as well. And during the Yamnaya period, spanning from 3300 to 2600 BC, bronze technology was also introduced, marking a significant advancement. And this era also witnessed the expansion of said Yamnaya culture, leading to long-distance trade in metals and valuable resources, such as salt from the hinterlands. And this trade likely contributed to the prestige and power of Proto-Indo-European societies. However, it is important to know that the native tradition of pottery making was relatively underdeveloped during this period. The Yamnaya people were also known for their unique funeral sacrifices as well next to this, which included wagons, carts, sheep, cattle, and horses. And these elaborate rituals were likely connected to a cult of ancestors and required specific prayers and ceremonies. This association between language and cult may have played a role in introducing the late Proto-Indo-European language to new speakers, where Yamnaya chiefdoms also featured institutionalized differences in prestige and power, organized along the principles of patron-client reciprocity. And this involved the exchange of gifts and favors between patrons, gods, and human clients. And remarkably, the average life expectancy during this time was relatively high, with many people living to be 50 to 60 years old. Next, Proto-Indo-European society, while hierarchical, did not exhibit a rigidly stratified structure. Instead, there was a general distinction between free individuals and slaves, the latter often prisoners of war. The free segments of society included an elite class of priests, kings, and warriors, alongside commoners. The presence of kurgan graves, marked by ornate dress, body ornaments, and weaponry, provides evidence of a recognized hierarchy of wealth and poverty. Some graves, notably larger than average and requiring the involvement of many people, suggest a higher status accorded to certain individuals. Yet these prestigious funerals were not exclusively reserved for the wealthiest, and certain groups, particularly smiths, were granted sumptuous burials, possibly due to the association of smithery with magic during the early Bronze Age. The Proto-Indo-European society also practiced a unique system of guest-host relations, underpinned by the mobility facilitated by the domestication of horses and the use of wagons. This reciprocity between guests and hosts was bound by oaths and sacrifices and was considered a moral obligation. Social inequalities were partially balanced by this system of mutual obligations of hospitality between guests and hosts. So this system then also provided a framework for maintaining peaceful relations and promoting hospitality, and its persistence in descendant cultures underscores its cultural significance. And each tribe followed a chief who sponsored feasts and ceremonies, which also had a similar peacekeeping function. These leaders were then immortalized in praise poetry. Poetry and songs then also held a central and esteemed place in Proto-Indo-European society. The poet-singer occupied a unique and highly regarded role, often being the highest paid professional within the community. This position was often hereditary, passing down from one generation to the next within specific families. The poet-singer not only needed to master the technical aspects of their art, but also acquire an extensive knowledge of traditional myths. These poets were rewarded handsomely for their performances, receiving gifts that could include horses, cattle, wagons, and even in some cases, women. And their status was elevated, and in certain cases, they developed stable relationships with noble princes or families. In other situations, they led a nomadic existence, moving from one court to another with their dependents. As sources of inherited cultural knowledge, these poets played a crucial role in preserving the memory of old heroic times. Their responsibility was to sing praise of heroes, kings, and gods, ensuring that these stories were passed down through the generations. And this was mainly an oral tradition, and it was thus passed on from parent to child. And composing sacred hymns then also held a special significance, as it was believed that this act would not only bring favor from the gods to the community, but also ensure that the memory of kings endured for many generations to come. And in that sense, Proto-Indo-European spiritual beliefs were animistic and polytheistic. Their religious practices revolved around sacrificial rites involving cattle and horses, likely overseen by a class of priests or shamans, which involved the slaughter of animals dedicated to the gods. And for them, regarding such sacrificial rites, in the western direction, the circular altar symbolized the earth and family, while the square altar represented the sky and the gods. A parallel duality of shapes exists in Greek and Roman traditions, where a round altar hosted the family hearth fire and rectangular altars were dedicated to offerings for the gods. Where the discovery of both square and round configurations of burnt stones and bones, likely serving as fire altars in Scandinavia's Bronze Age and Iron Age, suggest a shared practice among cultures widely separated in the Indo-European world. This hints at the likelihood that Proto-Indo-Europeans conducted similar sacrificial rituals in comparable enclosures, possibly atop kurgans, so burial mounds. And these structures, perhaps functioning as altars, allowed families or clans to make offerings to both ancestors and the household's minor deities, such as those presiding over the yard, livestock, trees, and groves. The square and circle from a Jungian lens also representing the self, where each act of sacrifice also served as a symbolic recreation of the world. Because in the Indo-European mythos, there were two primal beings, man, so Manu, and twin, Yemu. And the initial priest, man, sacrificed the first king, twin, so Yemu, who then assumed the role of Lord of the Dead, the first being to traverse the path of mortality, where participants in these sacrificial rites affirmed their shared ancestry, as it was believed that the first humans were formed from the dismembered parts of Yemu, and each birth was a reenactment of the primal elements uniting, akin to the recreation of Yemu, while each death echoed the original dismemberment. The Proto-Indo-European Pantheon further also offers insights into how the Indo-European deities might be linked, revealing both linguistic and mythological connections, and these deities, reconstructed from a common linguistic origin, share striking attributes and a rich body of myths. And even though we might not know much about the myths of these deities themselves in the original form, the Indo-European body of myths provide us with ample stories to shed light onto these figures lost to time. Among them we find Deus Pater, the god of daylight and the sky, who is accompanied by his consort Degum, the nurturing Earth Mother. Their daughter Hewos personifies the dawn, while their sons represent the divine twins. Additionally, Sehul and Mechnod embody solar and lunar aspects. Notably, some deities like the weather god Perkunos and the herding god Pechuson are found in a limited number of traditions, primarily in Western and Greco-Aryan contexts. This suggests that they might be later additions to the pantheon and did not spread across various Indo-European tribes. Though in the Western context, Deus Pater and Perkunos merged, so hence you're seeing what you're seeing on the screen. And the earthly deities surpass the sky gods in number, with every grove and spring possessing its protective powers. The earthly deities mostly consisted of many nature spirits. Among these, the two most significant entities were the Lord of Water and the Moisture Mother. The Lord of Water, Neptuno, held dominion over the subterranean waters. Interestingly, he also served as the progenitor of fire, conceptualized as a radiant or vital energy emanating from water. As in various Indo-European traditions, fire is poetically referred to as the descendant of water, where some scholars have also proposed a spouse goddess reconstructed as Diona, also referred to as the Moisture Mother. She is one reconstructed deity who governed the fertile, well-watered soils crucial for the sustenance of crops and grasses. In multiple Indo-European traditions, she played the role of the counterpart to the striker, Perkunos. And a variant of the Moisture Mother was the goddess Danu, known as River. She potentially held the status of the ancestress for numerous Indo-European tribes as well, including the Danavas in India, the Danans in Greece, the Tuatha Danann in Ireland, and the Danes in Denmark, all preserving her name. Many rivers and steppe regions still carry her name as well, such as the Don, the Danube, meaning holy river, and the Donets, and various others, where also a thematic echo occurs in the Vedic tradition, as Indra's wife Indrani displays a similar jealous and quarrelsome disposition under provocation. So also think here, for instance, Hera. However, as we will go into with the Curious and Sovereignty Goddess section, the moisture mother probably played a bigger role than just a connection to water. Next to this, within the Proto-Indo-European culture, the king often held the role of high priest. Think also the obscure Roman Quirinus as a later example, establishing a vital connection with the divine. Horse sacrifice, which is also linked to the sovereignty goddess, stood out as the most intricate ritual linked to kingship and royal authority. When conducted with due reverence, this ritual was believed to secure the favor of the gods, resulting in prosperity for the people. Where Proto-Indo-European society next to this also acknowledged the existence of magic. Various branches practiced similarly worded charms and curses, suggesting the prevalence of magic in their culture. Incantations, spells, and charms were integral to their medical practices, alongside the use of surgical instruments and herbal remedies. And the presence of magic in Proto-Indo-European society also underscores their belief in unseen forces and the use of rituals to influence their lives. The use of charms, curses, incantations, and spells reflects their quest for control over the supernatural. Yet at the core of Proto-Indo-European beliefs, however, was the ritual sacrifice of cattle, particularly cows, reflecting the primordial condition of the world order. And this practice was preserved in many Indo-European cultures, often linked to epic myths and legends. One such myth we're gonna go into in the next episode linked to the figure Trito, which is an ancient Proto-Indo-European figure and the foundation of the hero myth.